Hey everyone, welcome to the second episode of Two Trannies Talk with me, Kim Justice.
And me, Sophia, both are.
Hey!
Shit, and cunt. I am Kim's sweary girlfriend who has no redeeming qualities, according to a troll.
Well, you certainly do have endearing qualities. I think that's why I love
I
you.
know, I know I do, I know I do. And fuck the trolls.
Exactly, fuck the trolls. So, what have you been doing lately, Soph?
Well, I've actually been writing about you, haven't I?
You have been writing about me.
I mean, been writing about the fact that you lost 300 plus subscribers on your main channel because I appeared in a video on that channel.
I know, it's ridiculous, isn't it? I can believe that.
Ah.
Well, I could,
Well,
but I wasn't expecting it to be that much.
I don't begrudge you the fact that you're hesitant to have me in any future videos on your main channel because, we do live in a capitalist society, and you have to make ends meet, make sure you've got a roof over your head and food in front of you, on the table, etc., etc.
It just sucks. It just really does.
But this is why I hate capitalism. Mm-hmm. Because this is just adding insult to injury. Because we got a whole load of transphobic abuse when that video was posted, and we will post a link in the description box to that video. There was no mention that we were trans in it. We answered the questions that people posed, and it was just about gaming and pop culture.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can see just how much trans stuff was in it.
None.
Barely any. Barely any.
Yeah, well, as I said, I think I said this last week, the only mention in that video about anything trans was me saying Paris Lee is a narcissistic cunt and Blair White's a true scum cunt. That was it.
That was it. So,
and that was the joke at the end,
Yeah, but, I mean, most people didn't even bring that up. They just brought up, why are you pushing all this on us?
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned something earlier, because it's like, oftentimes when I do videos, like, it doesn't usually get mentioned, like, on my documentaries. I mean, it gets mentioned sometimes, but I think that it was kind of like, I don't know, made it more, maybe, I don't know if it made it more real for some people, or what?
I think so. I think don't take this the wrong way, but I think there are a lot of sort of like, I've had this myself, a lot of people, they go as far as respecting you by calling you, your female name, right? When you transition, but they still think you're one of the lads, really. Yeah. And I think because a lot of people had got used to you pre-transition on that channel, they sort of thought, yeah, okay, she's a trans, but she's still one of the lads. When I turn up, it's like an unknown quantity. It's like, oh fuck, she's a lesbian and she's going out with a trans activist, and they start fearing, this is all new to them.
Yeah, something like that. It's funny actually thinking about it. I'm kind of, as far as like the history of my channel goes, it's now kind of getting to half and half. Because I started doing YouTube like properly anyway, doing the stuff that I do now in 2012. And I transitioned in August of 2015. So it's getting close to 3 years.
Yeah, but I mean, we're not going to stop making videos. I mean, we've got the second channel. We haven't thought of a name for it yet.
Not really. It's just kind of Kim and Soph at the moment.
Well, that's fine.
Actually,
Kim and Soph.
It's still the uncut Kim, but I've been lazy. But
yeah. Shall we try not talking over one another?
Yeah, we can do that.
Anyways, so we're both pretty pissed off about this. Anyways, there will be a direct link in the description box to that article and a link to Kim's video she's done in the previous week. Yeah. So you can read what I've written and watch what Kim has produced. What videos is it you've been producing?
I've been producing a whole bunch of things. I did a worms video, my final worms video, I hope, on Monday. Like my last request from a certain Mr. Gary Pinkett, who loves his worms. But that should be the last one. Although I did hear that they're going to make a new 3D Worms game, so I don't know, maybe it won't be. But next Monday I've got a last video about Last Bronx coming, which is a really cool Sega fighting game. Should be quite an interesting story. There's a bit of smut involved, believe it or not. And I'm also working on No One Lives Forever.
Which is an
It's a first-person shooter from like 2000. Really cool game. Like it's like set in the 60s, and you play as like a spy called H.E.A.T.
And you're also working. You're going to be working on a Dune video as well.
Yes, got Dune coming up. Dune. I don't know how you say it, but yes, I'm currently working my way through that. Working my way through the first game,
which I guess is based on the book.
It's based on the book and the movie.
Right. Well, the book is my all-time favourite book. A lot of people will tell you it's very hard to read. It is very hard to read. Mainly because it's got an appendix of all the terminology, because it uses terminology which you're not used to, so it has actually an appendix at the end of it. As for the film, well, that's the one David Lynch film. Well, actually, there's several David Lynch films which aren't very good. But to be fair to David Lynch about Dune, do you know who was originally slated to direct it?
Oh, who?
Ridley Scott, who went off to make Blade Runner.
Indeed.
And so David Lynch was brought in quite late in its development. And he's always disowned it. Now, where I am on David Lynch is Eraserhead, great. The Elephant Man, great. Dune, not so great. Blue Velvet, awesome.
Yeah.
Wild at Heart, awesome. The Twin Peaks series, great. Fire Walk with Me, a very misunderstood film. But ever since then, he's really gone downhill. I mean, Lost Highway, it was kind of like, okay, I appreciate all the surrealism with all warped surrealism with David Lynch. Lost Highway, it's kind of like, you fucking lost me, David.
I kind of liked Mulholland Drive.
I know a lot of people love that film, but I don't. Yeah. I don't think it's that good.
It's a weird film. I've not seen it in many years, but I remember liking it.
But most David Lynch films are weird. That's what he's known for. Oh,
yes, of course. But I mean, especially weird. That one. Yeah.
But if I was to recommend anyone check out David Lynch film, see Blue Velvet.
Oh,
it's
show.
Because it's one of the it's I'd say one of the
more accessible ones.
When you think of Dennis Hopper, you think of two performances. One is Easy Rider. All right, some people might think of Speed, but there's really two. There's Easy Rider and there's Frank in Blue Velvet. Absolutely psychotic. Yeah,
and endlessly quotable.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, Daddy wants his bourbon. And yeah, that whole thing with the oxygen mask, which I think was nicked by the Coen brothers in that sort of. Yeah, I was about to say that. It sort of like was nicked from that, I reckon. But I would say probably the scariest psychotic performance, one of the most scariest psychotic performances ever from any actor. So Blue Velvet, go watch it. It's also where sort of David Lynch sort of started to lay the groundwork for Twin Peaks. It sort of had some of the same ideas.
Yeah, it was like kind of that. That was really when he got into like really like the weirdness of like the suburban, like small town deal. Yeah,
like there's that opening sequence with the sort of the white picket fences and everyone happy, and then suddenly it goes into the undergrowth and there's insects killing each other.
Yes.
And that was a metaphor for the whole film, which is, just because it looks nice doesn't mean, behind closed curtains it is.
Yeah, and don't they stumble upon a human ear?
Yes, that's right.
That's Yeah, it's a strange film. And you got the whole in dreams sequence as well, which is probably my favourite bit of the film.
Yeah. Anyway, we need to talk about the word tranny.
Yes,
The fact
tranny.
that our show uses the word tranny. Now, most trans people, well, actually, just about all but one trans person has laughed at the title.
Yeah, they have.
But one in particular really tried to make a big deal of it. Sarah non-binary Stone! As you can tell, she's from Newcastle. And she doesn't have a fucking sense of humour. Funny enough, actually, there's another trans woman I know who was originally from Geordieland, and she's quite sensitive to stuff. And when I told her the title, she laughed. She said, "I'm glad you've got a sense of humour."
Well, yeah, I think that's kind of important because, I don't know, I feel we kind of lack that in some way, and I think, and I mean, my personal opinion on the word tranny is that we shouldn't be afraid to reclaim such words for ourselves.
Yeah, my thoughts on it is a bit like this. If some wanker bloke screams at me, tranny freak, in the street, it's being abusive.
Well, yeah, for sure.
But if trans people amongst themselves refer to each other as tranny, I don't think that's offensive. It's similar to the way the N-word is used by black people. Though I'm not going to say the N-word. I'm not going to fall into the cutie pie trap. But what I will say is, when black people use the N-word, it's spelt differently. You can go and find this out for yourselves. So that's the way I see it. If trans people use it amongst themselves, fine. But if a cis person called me, a tranny, that's being abusive.
Yeah, it's like how queer has become part of the, LGBT vernacular.
Yeah.
I mean, that used to be a slur. I mean, and it still is if it's used, in a pejorative way by, someone who's attacking you. But it's also used very frequently for people to almost identify themselves and as a term for each other.
Yeah.
I'd say that was pretty apt
So,
comparison.
sort of. So we just wanted to address that because even though I've only had one complaint, I know there might be other trans people who were thinking, it's not on for them to use tranny. I mean, there has been debates in the trans community about the word tranny before. I remember, I think it was Jane County used it or something or other, and were complaining. I don't tend to use it, but I don't have an offence when trans people use it. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah. I mean, that's when I tend to use it. So
sort of trans related, and we will explain kind of why. We need to talk about Brianna Wu.
Yes, I mean, she's always kind of in the news for various things. I mean, obviously she's doing her campaign to, be part of the House of Representatives?
Yeah, she's running for Congress. Now, the reason I say it's sort of trans-related is I am 99.9% sure she's trans. However, she's always dodged the question whether she is trans.
Yeah.
So I can't say here she is trans. I'm saying I am fairly sure. It's a bit like the situation I had with Nikki Sinclair a few years ago. She was the UKIP MEP who then, of course, resigned from UKIP and became an independent MEP.
Yeah.
When someone showed me a video of her, it must have been back in 2012, and they asked me, is she trans? And I looked at the video, and even though I knew she, I could tell she was, I said I wasn't sure, right, to this person. Of course, a couple of years later, what happened? She comes out as trans.
Comes out, yeah.
Which was no surprise to me.
I mean, as far as Brianna's, trans status goes, I mean, if she is or isn't, I mean, as you say, it's, I mean, you can tell, mostly.
Yeah,
but,
I know some.
I mean,
I know some people say, why is this an issue? Well, she's running for Congress, and considering the state of the amount of transphobia there is against trans people in the United States, coming, from Congress, state legislative bodies, the White House, it would be actually quite important. It would do some good.
I
You
think
know,
so. I think it
it
would.
might be that she's waiting until she gets elected, and then she'll say, "Yes, I am trans."
That's the trouble, though. She probably won't get elected.
I don't know. She's running it. She is running as a Democrat in Massachusetts, and Massachusetts don't elect Republican. Generally, don't elect Republicans.
I know they generally don't, but I thought
But
she running against other Democrats.
no, I think she won the primary. I think she did win the primary.
Oh wow, okay, I didn't know that.
Having said that, Massachusetts is the state which elected Mitt Romney as governor.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think
But
that.
he did govern as a very liberal governor. A Republican governor, I have to say.
Yeah.
But anyways, enough about that. The reason we want to talk about Brianna Wu is because she's being a twat.
Yeah, well, which is often the case, but particularly, a lot about because she kind of organised a campaign against Nolan Bushnell.
Yeah.
Like one of the founding fathers of video games, which seemed to me to be based upon nothing but hearsay and like the most barest anecdotal evidence of things that
Well, it was based on gossip.
Nothing, just gossip. Like I think the worst thing that they pretty much said in the whole thing was he once invited some girl to get in a hot tub.
Well, no, the story I heard was that he was holding a board meeting in a hot tub.
Yeah.
Now, you've got to put this in context. This was the 1970s.
Yes.
It was a very different era. And he tried to get the secretary into the hot tub.
Mm.
Now, I think Bushnell has said, yes, this happened, but he said he wouldn't do it now.
Well, no.
And that's the important thing, right?
Because he's not on drugs anymore, because they all were back in those days.
The thing is, Atari had a reputation for being, a place where people didn't just go to work; they went to do lots of drugs as well.
Yes, seriously, God, they were a very disorganized company. It's just a bunch of hippies.
Yeah, I've heard some stories. I mean, for instance, there was one guy came in to do work, and it happened to be that he came in in his dressing gown. Mm. And he'd come from one pool party, he did his work and went off to another pool party. Basically, when they used to go in the toilets, there was this like cloud of, marijuana smoke.
Mm.
Yeah, and that when the Time Warner people were thinking about buying the company, they went round and they were shocked.
Yeah, they were completely shocked.
Partying these guys were doing. This was a company which was a partying company.
Mm.
We owe a great, all gamers owe a great debt to Nolan Bushnell. If it hadn't been for Nolan Bushnell, there wouldn't be a games industry as it is now. Okay? Yeah. He deserves a Lifetime Achievement Award.
He does. And he was denied one. Which is kind of the big thing in the end. He was denied one by GDC. Yeah, and
Brianna Wu, is wrong on this. I mean, she really has got up the nose of Rick from Review Tech USA, and Rick is no fucking misogynist. The guy has defended trans gamers. There's a video where he has seen him do so. The guy's in favour of universal healthcare, so he is very much on the left in America. He hates Alex Jones, thinks he's a cunt. Yeah. The guy is a decent guy, and I think that if someone like him picks up on Brianna Wu, it's saying something.
I agree.
I mean, if we pick up on her, it's definitely saying something. I just think she's got this really wrong. If Nolan Bushnell had done this now, yes, that's an issue. Different time, though.
I think there needs to be. I mean, obviously, cases of historical abuse, as in abuse. Obviously, that should come by, but we're not talking about that.
Yeah, he wasn't fucking Rolf Harris or Jimmy fucking Savile.
No, not in the slightest. And I think it kind of spoke volumes that really the outrage was pretty much all coming on this from like people like Brianna, who are like modern, contemporary, like people who weren't there. Like a lot of people came out who were there at the time and said, no, the culture there was nothing like what you're presenting it to have been. Nothing like that at all.
Yeah.
Like people who actually worked with Nolan and worked at Atari, and not just blokes. I'm talking about like the women who worked there as well. So it's like, there needs to be. I mean, because I feel that the sort of like thing, the way that Brianna who does it, it's kind of like one of those slippery slope things where almost like if you, I don't know, if like in the 1960s you wolf whistled at someone, then that's a case of sexual assault that should haunt you forever.
It's whether someone does it now, I think, is an important thing, and I don't think Nolan Bushnell would do it now. So,
no, I don't think so.
Shut the fuck up, Brianna.
Yeah, talk more about some moonwalks.
Also, sort of trans-related, because there was a trans person who worked on a port of Doom. We want to talk about Doom. Well, I want to talk about Doom.
Oh, definitely. Love talking about Doom.
Because it's 25 years at the end of this year since it was released. And Kim has made a video. Maybe she'll put it in the...
yeah, I'll put that in the description if you've not seen it.
Video. There's also a video by H.E.A.T, which I think is quite... I think that's the one which really goes into detail.
That is a big one. It's about an hour long.
Software. And about how, they all fell out with one another and were basically ending up sacking one another.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Which was good in a way, because a lot of companies then spawned off from it because of all the fallouts. I mean, would we have gotten games like Deus Ex? Sure.
But we need to talk about Doom. It's the 25th anniversary, but we need to talk about the fact that it was actually a revolutionary game, not just because it's probably it is the first-person shooter which sort of spawned the whole genre. Okay, it wasn't the first. That would be Wolfenstein 3D, which was also made by ID Software. But Doom was the first one which really looked the shit.
It did, yeah.
And I'll tell you, when I first played it back in the 90s, and I know people will laugh now, we were scared. This wasn't scary.
Yeah, I think there is still a certain scary side to Doom. Not necessarily in terms of cutscenes or what have you, or story, but there's that certain feeling you get when you play it when, say you're deep into a level, you've got virtually no ammo left, and all of a sudden the lights go out and you get loads of enemies. And the thing is with Doom, it's not like you save and you can just go from that checkpoint. If you die, you go back to the start.
Well, I mean, you could hear the growls of the creatures in the dark. You're going, where the fuck are they?
Yeah.
And then you go through a door and there's 5 of them that you have to shoot. And
yeah, and they'll shout at you.
I remember the first time that happened to me, I jumped.
Yeah, and the sound of flesh being eaten and the ominous music.
Someone once compared Doom to the first time there was cinema, and you heard about, and there were people you hear about who ran out of the cinema when a train was coming towards the camera, because it was going to come through the screen. Yeah. There's a similar sort of experience, I think, with Doom. I think it was some games journalist who said this, and I agree. But as I said, it wasn't just a revolutionary FPS. It's also revolutionary in 2 other criteria. First of all, everybody says Windows is what made people buy MS-DOS-based PCs. No. It was actually Doom. Doom killed off the Amiga. Now, the Amiga was on its way out anyways, but as Kim can tell you, because she owned an Amiga, it was the one game you couldn't play on the Amiga.
You couldn't. I mean, they tried to. They made various Doom clones for the Amiga. I mean, games like Gloom, Alien Breed 3D, Fears. I mean, there's a lot of games, and some of them aren't that bad either. But
yeah, I've played Gloom, and I don't think it's that bad. It's very pixelated, which is annoying.
It is, yes. I mean, that's kind of one of the problems. They're all quite pixelated and they're all a bit slow. But everyone kind of, when Doom was released, from that point on, everyone was like, "Oh, when's Doom going to come on the Amiga?" But it had no interest. And also, I think one thing that maybe if it had been a European company, they would have had more interest in putting Doom on the Amiga. But one thing that obviously doesn't necessarily is that it were an American company. And in America, the Amiga was dead, completely dead around about 1990.
Yeah.
So there was never any question of putting the game on the Amiga. It was like, well, why would you put it on that? It's a dead system. And so that kind of ended up, in Europe anyway, really being the thing that kind of pushed us away from microcomputers, certainly from a gaming perspective, towards the PC.
Yeah. Yeah, and another criteria it was revolutionary in is the way it was distributed.
The shareware model.
Yeah, it was basically when they first released Doom, you had to download it from a server.
Yeah, you could either download it or you could get it mail order. Like they would distribute the discs, like the first episode, and then you'd have advertisers getting another, or like you could go on bulletin boards and so forth.
But if you think about Steam, GOG, Origin, this is where it began, really, with Doom. And so, as I say, it wasn't just a revolutionary FPS. And I actually think in 50 years' time, people will still be playing the original. It was such a revolutionary game for its time. If you weren't around then, you're not going to understand. You know, it was one of those games.
Yeah. I think that I play through Doom at least once every year. And also, I mean, going all the way forward to the new one, I mean, has kind of brought that feeling of Doom really back to a new generation, as successful as that game's been.
I do, but I hate this sort of rebooting when they actually call the game the same name as they called the original. You know, it's just annoying.
It is kind of annoying.
But I will say I have seen the new version of Doom, and yeah, it's good.
It is fantastic. It really was. It was one of my favourite games of last year. Or was it last year or the year before? The year before.
Well, yeah, it was the year before.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what else do you want to talk about?
I think what we can talk about next, we kind of often talk about movies and that often on this show, and we kind of wanted to kind of introduce a segment where we kind of discuss like a classic movie, a modern movie, a movie that interests both of us, and we can try and see it. And the first one we want to do that for is H.E.A.T.
Yes, made in the mid-90s, directed by Michael Mann. It's actually, funny enough, a remake of a TV movie he made back in the late 80s called H.E.A.T Takedown. And it does have some of the dialogue which is in H.E.A.T Takedown, as you know.
Yeah.
It is truly a remake. But H.E.A.T stands alone and is far superior.
It is, yes.
It stars Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. Now, generally, I think Al Pacino is the better actor to Pacino, mainly because he has a broader range.
He does have
you think of De Niro, and he's always playing psychos.
Brooding psychopath characters.
Whereas Pacino, you know, you think of not just the Godfather films. You know, you've got Serpico, you've got Justice for All. You know, I mean, obviously people know him for Scarface and Carlito's Way, and you know those are both great films. In fact, Carlito's Way, Pacino has never looked cooler at that beard and that long leather color. Just absolutely
uber cool in that film.
Yeah, uber cool. Yeah. So H.E.A.T. Ironically, though, with H.E.A.T, De Niro is the better actor.
He is. He's very understated in that role.
Yeah, and what the big deal about this film was it was the first time De Niro and Pacino had been in the same scene with one another. They both had been in The Godfather Part 2, but they'd been in different parts of The Godfather Part 2.
Yes. Robert played young Vito.
Yeah. All right. And of course, you know, De Niro did win a Best Supporting Actor for that role, which he did purely in Italian.
Yeah.
Remember?
I think they only spoke like 1-2 lines of English in the whole film.
Yeah.
Like, I think he says, "I'll make him an offer he can't refuse." Yeah.
So the setup with H.E.A.T is Pacino plays a cop, and De Niro plays the robber. And he takes his work very, very seriously. You also have, in supporting roles, you have Val Kilmer, not being as annoying as he generally is.
Yeah, probably his best role.
Yeah, before he took up eating pies, because fuck me, have you seen Val Kilmer now?
He's a bit chubby.
Yeah, he's turning into a Marlon Brando, isn't he? It also has Tom
Sizemore's in it as one of the robbers.
Yeah. Also, Danny Trejo when he had short hair.
Young Natalie Portman is in it.
Yeah, and also the black president from 24.
Yep, Dennis Haysbert.
Yeah.
There's a lot of famous actors. Who's the one who plays the real scummy robber?
And Hank Azaria. How do you pronounce it? The guy who does the voice for Homer. That's it. Yeah. So, why is this film brilliant? Because it's fucking intense.
It is one of the most intense films. Especially as it builds up to especially one big set piece, which is, I think, still probably, I don't think there's ever been a greater shootout in a movie than the one in H.E.A.T.
I think of one TV show, there was probably a better shootout in The Wire, only because that was more of a realistic type gunfight. But yeah, the gunfight in H.E.A.T is absolutely fucking brilliant.
Yeah, the loudness of it is because I think especially like the mixing on that, the gunfire is just mixed so loud. Like as soon as Val Kilmer just starts firing, it puts you right back in your seat. Yeah.
Now, as I said, De Niro is the better actor. A lot of people complained about Pacino being over the top. At the time, I would have said, that's definitely he was doing the scenery, the whole, she's got a great ass, and you've got it all the way up it. And don't waste my motherfucking time.
Yeah, he is over the top, big time.
Yeah,
but there's a reason.
A few years after the H.E.A.T was released, I saw an interview with Pacino, and he said the reason why he was like that was because when he did the research for the film, a lot of the cops he was hanging around with to research the role were all taking speed. They were all up on amphetamines, he said, and that's why he did that. Yeah. As I said, Pacino is not the better actor in this film. De Niro is the better actor, but Pacino is the better actor overall.
That seems fairly common, doesn't it? That the cops taking speed. I mean, you kind of look at like workaholic people, and you think, oh yeah, they're just a workaholic. When truth is, well, certainly back in the day, a lot of the time they'd probably been on speed and just hadn't been asleep for a few days.
Without revealing the ending, one of my nitpicks is actually the ending. I actually think, and you'll know this, it would have had a better ending if they just left De Niro to drive off to the airport.
Yeah.
I think that was a more fitting ending.
I think
I like to feel what ending is, but that would have been a better ending for me.
I think without revealing too much, De Niro's character in the film is always very emotionless and quite perfect and very pragmatic in everything he does, and that's pretty much the one time he makes a decision based on emotions as opposed to what's logically correct.
Yes. Yeah. Anyways, if you haven't seen it, go see it. We haven't revealed too much. You will be brilliant. And I'd also add, there's a good performance from John Voight. I forgot to mention him.
John Voight.
It's also got a couple of cameos. Tone Loc, the rapper from the 80s, and Henry Rollins, the punk singer. That I could have done without Henry Rollins, to be honest. I mean, as I've told you before, I am just it's mind-boggling to me how Henry Rollins has had a successful career, considering he can't fucking sing and he can't fucking act.
Yeah, but he makes the very best with what he's got, and he can certainly talk.
And the other thing I would say about H.E.A.T is it's nearly 3 hours long, but you will not notice the time.
It's the quickest 3 hours you'll spend in your life.
Yeah. It's a very intense film. Go watch it. It's one of the best cops and robbers film you'll ever see, if not the best.
Yeah.
I would say The French Connection. Okay, not strictly cops and robbers, cops and drug dealers, but it's on a par with
It's
films
on that
like
level. Yeah.
Yeah.
That real high top level. One of the best films of the 90s.
Yeah. Anyways, because it was the Oscars on Sunday and Gary Oldman won
Yes.
for Best Actor, finally,
At long
I'd add.
last. Well deserved.
Um,
Now, do you think I mean, have you seen Darkest Hour? I mean,
I haven't yet, actually.
I mean, I don't know if is that a golden handshake? Is it one of his best performances, or is it deserved? I don't know.
I always heard the story that that back in the day, Michael Douglas won Best Oscar for Best Acting Oscar for Wall Street. But it was rumoured that they wanted to give it to him for Fatal Attraction, but because that film was so controversial,
yeah,
the Academy didn't dare. I kind of think it's kind of like, oh, we better just give Gary Oldman an Oscar,
Yeah.
It's a bit like, funny enough, Pacino is another one of those. They gave it for
Scent of Woman, which is an average film at best.
Yeah, but I mean, De Niro's won an Oscar for The Godfather Part 2. He won it for The Deer Hunter.
And Raging Bull as well.
And Raging Bull, right? Pacino's only won one, Scent of a Woman, which isn't a bad film, but it's not his best.
No, far from it.
And sort of like, oh, fuck it. Give it to him, before he pops his corner.
I'm not sure. And where do you stand on, Darkest Hour and portrayals of Winston Churchill in 2018? Because, I mean, I'm on the internet, I do see a lot of people being like, well, Churchill's in many respects, a complex man, shall we say.
Yes. Well, I haven't seen the film, so I don't want to really judge it until I see it. However, I was going to recommend Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy. Not the TV series. The TV series is incredibly boring. The film is lackadaisical as well. It does sort of plod along at its own pace, shall we say. But Gary Oldman puts in a brilliant performance as George Smiley.
He does. That was the best thing about it for me.
Yeah. John Hurt as well. I'd also say Colin Firth was on form.
Mark Strong, Tom Hardy.
Yeah. Toby Jones. It's got a stellar cast. Now, the way to understand, because the plot is actually quite complicated to Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy, but the way to understand it is basically these are middle-aged men who are very insecure about their own fiefdoms.
Yes.
They're paranoid of one another, right? That's the way to understand it. It's a film about insecurity, basically.
Aye.
It's in security services. That's the way to understand it. It also has a great performance, but I know you're going to disagree with this, from Benedict Cumberbatch.
Butthead.
I know you don't like him, but I do.
Yeah.
I mean, you haven't seen Star Trek Into Darkness, have you?
The only Khan is Ricardo Montalban.
Yeah, I know. That's what Quentin Tarantino said. Look, Benedict Cumberbatch is actually really good in that. Yeah, he does do it. I don't know what it is about.
There's just something about Benedict Cumberbatch that turns me off, and I think it's because, I don't know, it's kind of like actors like him. Eddie Redmayne is another one who always turns me off. It's just, oh god, I'm gonna sound awful here, but it seems like a lot of modern day English actors are just all they all seem to come from the same private school. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you could say that, like Patrick Stewart and Kenneth Branagh came through the RSA.
Yeah, no, yeah. I'm not. I don't have anything against them for that, but there doesn't seem to be enough range. Like there seems to be less actors coming from different areas now who are getting a lot of success.
if
I
you're
mean, that's
talking
no
about,
fault. That's no fault of Benedict Cumberbatch or Eddie Redmayne. I know that, but I know it's just British industry seems to make a lot of the same old films. It seems quite
I think what
stagnant
you're
to me.
trying to say is there's not enough Michael Caine's
Yeah, basically.
or Bob Hoskins.
That's kind of what I
Yeah,
was trying to say. Yeah. And I
yeah.
mean, as far as Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy goes, because I've seen it, I actually kind of go the other way from Soph on this one. I recommend the TV series more than I recommend the film. Mainly because I think it is a slow. I mean, you're never not going to make Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy slow paced. I mean, it's a big John le Carré Cold War spy novel about, as you say, it's about these insecure people in the security services with their own fiefdoms. But I think that when I watched Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, having already seen the TV series, I actually found the film to be a little rushed.
I mean, the TV series. Do you know my main complaint about the TV series? Not enough Gil Bennett.
H.E.A.T Bennett was fantastic in it. There's no doubt about that. Such a good actor.
Yeah,
Sadly,
and I mean,
deceased recently.
anyone of my age will remember Shelley, and Shelley was brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, it's got obviously other great actors. I mean, obviously Alec Guinness as George Smiley is definitive for me.
It's also
Ian Richardson's in it.
I also forgot the name of the actor. He played the South African baddie in Lethal Weapon 2.
Oh God!
He had a female name, didn't he? Beverly. He played the drunken journalist in the original series.
Yeah. I don't know. I just found that the TV series kind of gives that. It gives it all so much more room to breathe. I mean, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy I thought was an okay film, but it kind of felt like a bit like a greatest hits.
One thing you mentioned about John le Carré, I mean, the thing is, you think about the adaptations of le Carré's novels. I mean, The Russia House was another adaptation of one of his novels.
Yeah, Constant Gardener.
Not exactly thrilling, is it?
No.
And also The Constant Gardener. Now, The Constant Gardener was better.
Yeah, it was all right.
But again, it is a film that takes its time.
I don't think you're ever going to make a John le Carré film purposefully fast-paced and good.
Yeah.
It's just incompatible. It's like Andrei Tarkovsky.
The other film I wanted to recommend, because we've talked about Michael Mann and H.E.A.T. For those who don't know, Michael Mann is the guy who created Miami Vice. And later the film, which is a pile of shite, I'm sad, I have to sadly say.
It was unfortunately bad.
Yes. And I mean, Colin Farrell. For starters, Colin Farrell's fucking mullet in it. Yeah. Anyways, the film Dodge, the TV series actually still stands up today. Okay, the TV series was actually fairly decent for a mainstream US TV series. Okay.
Yeah.
I always have to caveat that because mainstream US TV. I generally find a lot more lame than British stuff. Okay.
Oh yes.
If you give me a choice between Miami Vice and Dio and Pasco, I'm going to say Dio and Pasco.
Oh,
okay.
God, yeah, it's got Warren Clark in it.
Yeah, exactly. Who was also, and let's remember, Warren Clark was in Clockwork Orange.
He was.
He was. Yes. Anyways, where was I? Yes, Michael Mann. Now, Michael Mann created Miami Vice, a TV series. Around the same time, William Friedkin, who directed in the early 70s The French Connection, The Exorcist, then went on to direct Sorcerer, which we will talk in a future episode because it's an important film in the development of Hollywood and the direction Hollywood's gone.
In the downfall of the kind of director.
Yeah, exactly. Along with Heaven's Gate. But Friedkin came back in the 80s and made To Live and Die in LA. And there's two films which I say sums up the 80s so well. One of them is American Gigolo. The other, which was made right at the beginning of the 80s, so probably was in production in the 70s, but if you look at it, it's a very 80s film. The other is To Live and Die in LA.
Yeah.
The imagery, the attitude, just about everything about it is very 1980s. And the reason I bring it up, and it is a brilliant film, I'd add, the reason I bring it up is because Michael Mann tried to sue William Friedkin because he said it was too much resembled Miami Vice. Wow, it's the same idea.
I bet Friedkin was happy about that.
Sorry?
I bet William Friedkin was pleased about that. Did he try and beat Michael Mann up, or?
I don't know. I mean, I just thought it was ridiculous.
It's ridiculous, yeah.
To Live and Die in LA is about a Secret Service agent who's after a counterfeiter. For those who don't know, in America, the Secret Service are charged with protecting the president and to deal with counterfeiters.
Yeah.
And this guy is after a counterfeiter played by William Dafoe. William Patterson is the agent.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to reveal too much about it because it does have a bit of a shock twist to it at the end. But it's a very clever twist as well, I'd add. There's two, actually. The second one's very clever. But it is a brilliant film. It summed up the 1980s. Rent it from Amazon or Netflix or wherever, check it out because I really recommend people see this film because it really summed up the 1980s for me, and I did live through the 1980s, so I remember them well.
Willem Dafoe's one of those actors who's just good in everything, isn't he?
I never. People would probably say body of evidence.
Well, okay, but I'm sure there's something. Yeah. I'm sure there's something to it. Did you ever watch Antichrist with him in it? The Lars von Trier film.
No.
He gets naked in that. Well, quite vociferously so. Apparently, and there's a big close-up shot, but apparently they had to have a stunt penis for him.
I think the performance most people might remember William Dafoe from is other than the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, where he plays the Green Lantern. Oh God, what's the fucking? I'm not a Spider-Man fan.
Isn't he Dr. Octopus in that?
No, that was
Green Goblin. Green Goblin.
Green Goblin. That's it. Yeah, he played the Green Goblin in the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man. Other than that, maybe people will remember him from Platoon.
Yes,
and
for sure.
That very famous scene where he's coming out the jungle. Yeah. Yes, I would say most of the time William Dafoe is one of those actors who he's in tons and tons and tons of films. Right? But he's never really had a starring role. He's always a supporting actor.
Last Temptation of Christ, I guess, was probably one of his biggest starring roles as well.
Oh yeah, did you ever hear about when that was first shown on Channel 4?
It got tons of complaints, didn't it? Like tons.
Yeah, it was worked out, but hardly any of those people who complained actually watched the film. It is. Yeah. Sorry, The Last Temptation of Christ is
not one of Scorsese's best, I agree.
Yeah, probably the film he won't want to talk about. You wanted to talk about something Milo the Troll was published.
Oh yes, yes, it's kind of an old subject, but there's an article saying about how because there's a lot of speedrunning events, like big speedrunning events, and some people have been complaining that they've been taken over by people from like the LGBT, like specifically the T communities, like trans communities, and there's kind of like mixed. I mean, obviously, like the Milo article is kind of just bollocks. But one kind of thing that's kind of interesting about it is like how events like these kind of deal with, these questions of inclusion, and are they doing the best or are they doing the most? Because I mean, with AGDQ this year, I mean, I've been a big fan. I've been a big fan of the event for a few years, but for various reasons, I've kind of found that it's kind of gone from a very kind of intimate thing where people of all stripes, all shapes and sizes were happily welcome all the time, but I've kind of feel like it's gotten a bit more corporate in recent years and a lot more restrictive. Like for the GDQ just gone past, like people weren't even really allowed to chat. You had to pay to actually chat. You had to do a subscription. like to be in a very heavily moderated chat, and it's like, it's like I'm not sure how it feels. It's like, is this like a case of like well-meaning, I suppose, people doing the most, and then we kind of end up getting flack for it?
It's an overreaction. Take action when somebody is out of order, okay? Otherwise, don't bother.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of,
It's an overreaction. I mean, we know the gaming community is full of a few arseholes, okay?
Yeah, totally.
And that's very sad. But I can't sit here and say every gamer is a Gamergate, arsehole.
No, because it's ridiculous. Really.
That would be a generalisation.
I think it always seems to be, there's this whole thing, and it seems to be either one side or the other. It's either both us or them or both who end up feeling like they have to walk on eggshells all the time. And I get that, some people people on both sides can be very sensitive to a lot of different things. But a median kind of needs to be found, I think. Because otherwise it seems like we're being paired against each other, even despite, like, or because of people's well-meaning efforts.
Yeah.
That we're taking away people's fun.
I remember seeing a video by some gamer who was complaining about, there was some sort of conference and there was like a fringe meeting for LGBT gamers. And he said, well, this isn't inclusive because it's not allowing people who aren't LGBT in. Hey, the point is, you arsehole, that LGBT people have, basically been, persecuted, right?
Yeah.
And by inclusion, what they mean is they welcome them, right? Want to listen to what they've got to say.
Yes.
Right? That's, white heterosexual males have practically dominated the gaming scene for decades. And, now there are other people coming forward and saying, hey, we also game. And I actually think, as I've mentioned to you at the beginning, about that, some of the reaction we had to the video I appeared in on your channel, that this is a lot of insecurity. It's like, oh shit, things are going to change, and people don't know how it's going to change, and they're scared that they're going to, somebody's going to be lost. No,
yeah, I mean, there is change, and change is good, but I just think that sometimes, I mean, it's like going back to like those sort of things. Like I remember when PAX, I think it was a couple of years ago, like they had an event where they introduced something like, oh, we've got a diversity lounge.
Yeah, I think this is what they were complaining about.
But something like that. Not only one, it sounds corporate as fuck to begin with, and two, it's like, I don't know. It's like, again, it's like, I don't agree. It seems like a form of segregation.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would prefer integration, but I think the problem is,
it's like stereotypical safe space.
You know as well as I do about the amount of shit trans people get generally, right? And I think trans people, one of the reasons a lot of trans people I know sort of only socialise with other trans people is because they feel safe doing so. It's sad.
It's unfortunate, but
I understand why, right? And that's that's unfortunate. If gamers weren't such assholes towards minorities, then we wouldn't have this issue. So as Will Wheaton once said, "Don't be a dick."
That should be a good philosophy to take in everything. Just don't be a dick.
Right, now, one last thing, because I'm going on a rant here, okay? I am going on a rant, right?
Yeah, go on. Rant away.
Okay. Currently on BBC Two, there's a series called Back in Time for Tea. And this follows on from Back in Time for Dinner. Now, I'll explain the difference. Back in Time for Dinner was where they took sort of a middle-class family back in time to see what they were eating in the 40s, 50s, and they did the house up as in the appropriate era. They ate the foods from that era. They did the things that people did in that era, right?
Yeah.
No, there were 2 series of that, but before that, there was also Super Sizers Go.
Yes,
right?
Super Sizers.
Right now, Giles Corrin and who
Sue
was
Perkins.
the? Sorry,
Sue Perkins.
right, Sue Perkins. Now, Charles Corrin and Sue Perkins, okay, basically dressed up and ate the food of whatever era, whether it'll be the Elizabethan era or the Renaissance or what the fuck ever. The only one I actually ever enjoyed was the 1970s because there was a lot of nostalgia for me.
Yeah.
Right? I'll admit that. Okay. There were 2 series of this, and Giles and Sue said, no, we're not doing any more of these. But then Giles went on to present this Turn Back Time for Dinner, which basically, as I've said, took families back to various eras, up to the present day about how people were eating and doing whatever, right?
Yeah.
Now we've got a northern family, a working class family doing it. Right? Give it up. I am sick of this fucking television. The BBC are milking this fucking concept, and it is getting boring and cringeworthy, and the stereotypes in it are just hilarious. Yeah.
There's only so much dishes like you
every
can
time
cover,
there's a wartime era. Yeah, we all know that people, couldn't eat bacon and butter during the fucking war. We know this, okay? Why do we need to be reminded about it time and time and time again?
We were taught that when we were like 11 years old.
Right. Now, as I said, there have been variations of this. Now, what variation I will recommend to people is Electric Dreams. Now, this was where they had a family from Reddit. Basically, they looked at the evolution of home technology from the 1970s right up until the millennium. And that was actually a good series. That was an interesting series, right? It was a one-off. They didn't milk it for anything. That was good, right? There was another series, funny enough, this was actually shown on BBC One, called Turn Back the High Street, where for one summer, and actually, Greg, food can't get tougher than this, Wallace actually presented it, where basically they they managed to, obtain the service of one high street, BBC, somewhere in Somerset. And so basically it started in the Victorian era and went up to the 1970s, right?
Yeah.
They sort of did analysis of what people, were doing during the Victorian era and then, onwards and whatever. And that was sort of interesting. It was a one-off show. That's it. Right, they've done it.
Yeah,
move
that's
on.
it.
Right? Okay, one-offs are fine. But the thing is, the BBC keep fucking flogging this fucking,
Dead horse.
Yeah, again and again and again. And I am sick and fucking tired of it.
Especially when it comes to food. It's always food that gets flogged the most.
Yeah.
It's a bit ridiculous, yes. I mean, it's just kind of like the same old shit with, like, food programs. It's kind of a bugbear of ours, I guess, in one ways. I mean, I'm all for, like, historical recreation. I mean, there's some really great channels on YouTube that do historical recreation cooking. Like, there's Townsend's, which is one of my favourites, which is, like, 18th century. And that's interesting to me, and it's quite warmly presented, but it's just like, oh yeah, we just shoved this family in, and we're calling it Back in Time for Tea, because it's northern. It's like, come on, you're running out of ideas here.
There was another one on last year, the Sweet Makers, which looked at 3 eras of sweet making. And that was fine, okay? Yeah. Interesting. They did a Christmas special, and I don't think there'll be any more of them. Yeah. Right? It's the same variation of this concept, and I'm just getting sick and tired of it.
Yeah, I think the historical side is interesting, but when it's more of like the social experiment side, it's like, we've seen this before. But yeah.
Yeah, as I said, BBC, fucking stop it. Yeah. Okay?
We pay your bloody licence fees.
I mean, I know some people say, because I went on a rant about cookery shows last week, and some people say I've got something against cookery shows. Not all cookery shows. I love Rick Stein, right?
Rick
The
Stein's
reason
great.
I love Rick Stein is he's not a put-down arsehole. He
No.
might have a Michelin star or two, but, you know, he cooks the shit we would cook.
Absolutely.
So you do that, you know, and he's a likeable guy.
Yeah,
so,
very likeable.
you know. Anyway.
Well, I do believe I think we've run out of topics.
Yeah.
We have been.
Good. So.
We had a good chat. It was nice to end on a nice rant about shitty cooking shows, or shitty food shows, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yes, thank you for joining us for another episode of Triple C, Two Chinese Talk. I've been Kim Justice, and you have been...
Sophia Botha. Be seeing you!
Yeah, and as mentioned before, you can check out Sophia's blog at sophiabotha.xyz. Obviously, you can check out my channel by searching me on YouTube. I'm sure you'll find it. And yeah, we shall see you later. Bye!